My twin sister convinced our parents to pay for her dream wedding by telling them I didn't want one. So I showed up to the rehearsal dinner with my own engagement ring. For 24 years, Celeste was the golden child while I lived in her shadow. She got a bigger room, a newer car, a college fund that mysteriously doubled while mine stayed the same. Our parents had always favored her, not subtly, but with the kind of blatant bias that makes you question your own worth from childhood. The wedding lie was her masterpiece of manipulation. 6 months ago, when I casually mentioned that I wanted a small ceremony someday, she turned my words into a weapon. She told our parents that I thought weddings were outdated capitalist schemes designed to bankrupt families. She portrayed me as a cynical twin who would rather spend money on a trip to Europe than on a wedding ceremony. She even claimed that I had called traditional marriage patriarchal nonsense during a family dinner I missed because of work. Mom and Dad believed every word of her fiction. "We're so glad at least one of you values tradition," Mom said, writing out another $5,000 to upgrade the venue for Celeste. "Your sister has such a strange idea of romance." Dad nodded, adding another 1,000 to have her dress altered. "At least we'll only have to pay for one wedding." The irony was stifling. While they were funding Celeste's fairy tale, I was quietly dating Fletcher, a gentle bookstore owner who collected vintage poetry and made me laugh until my sides hurt. When he proposed to me during a thunderstorm last month, using his great-great-grandmother's Art Deco heirloom ring, I had never been so sure of anything in my life. We had planned to announce our engagement at a family dinner on Sunday, but the invitation to Celeste's rehearsal dinner arrived first. Handwritten on cream-colored paper, it seemed like fate, providing me with the perfect stage for revenge. I slipped the ring on and walked into the country club ballroom where Celeste reined in her flowing pink rehearsal dress. Crystal chandeliers cast romantic shadows across tables covered in silk and adorned with orchids that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The room fell silent as I approached her desk, my heels clicking on the marble floor. "Happy tomorrow," I said sweetly, holding out my left hand so the diamond would catch the candlelight. "I have some exciting news to share, too." Celeste's face went pale. When had this happened? 3 weeks ago. Funny thing about weddings. Turns out I wanted one after all. I smiled at the stunned faces around us. Fletcher and I were thinking of a spring ceremony, something intimate and meaningful. Our parents looked on in complete shock. Dad's face was changing from confusion to understanding to something much darker. Mother clutched her wine glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. "But you said she was against the marriage." Our cousin Delilah whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear. The entire bridal party turned to look at Celeste. Her groom, Garrett, looked between us, clearly sensing the dangerous undercurrent but not understanding its source. Celeste's bridesmaids exchanged awkward glances. "This is my night," Celeste hissed through clenched teeth. "And tomorrow is yours," I replied calmly. "I'm just sharing the good news with the family." But as I watched our parents' expressions change from shock to cold calculation, I realized that my announcement had done more than expose Celeste's lie. The way my dad's jaw clenched, the way my mom's eyes narrowed as she studied my ring. Something was terribly wrong. Later, as the guests mingled awkwardly at the dessert table, Garrett pulled me into the empty dressing room. "There's something you need to know about tomorrow," he said, his voice barely audible. "Something Celeste doesn't even know yet. Something I just discovered tonight." My blood turned to ice. Garrett's hand shook as he pulled out his phone and began scrolling frantically through messages. The dressing room felt claustrophobic, the hangers pressing into my back as he leaned in. "You came to me 3 months ago," he whispered. "You said Celeste needed someone stable, someone who could handle her impulsiveness." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He showed me his phone, bank statements, wire transfers, all from my parents' joint account. "They were paying me," he said, his voice breaking. 50 grand to propose, another 100 grand if I said yes to the wedding. They said it was an investment in Celeste's future. The room spun. "You're lying. If only I could." His face was gray with shame. I needed the money. My mom's medical bills. I convinced myself it wasn't so bad, that I could learn to love her. I grabbed his phone, scrolling through the messages. My dad's contact name was listed as a business associate. The texts were clinical, transactional accounts of the wedding timeline, discussions of managing Celeste's expectations and ensuring long-term stability. "But tonight," Garrett continued, When your dad saw your ring, he pulled me aside. He wants to double the wedding payment if I can convince you to break up with Fletcher before the ceremony. My knees buckled. What? He said, if both daughters marry suitable men, that will solve the family succession problem. He called Fletcher a nobody who would never amount to anything. It all became sickeningly clear. This wasn't about love or tradition. This was about control, about ensuring that both Celeste and I ended up with men who could be bought, men who could keep us exactly where our parents wanted us. Garrett, I whispered, are you going to do this? Take the money? He looked at the floor. I don't know. I came here with intent, but the way they treated you, the way they lied about everything. He looked at me with desperation in his eyes. What kind of family buys their daughters' husbands? Before I could answer, the closet door burst open. Celeste was standing there, her rehearsal dress rumpled, her mascara smeared across her cheeks. I heard it all. She was crying. Every damn word. Garrett took a step toward her. Celeste, can I explain? Explain what? She screamed. That you never loved me? That my own parents had to pay someone to marry me? That I was so worthless that even my twin sister got real love while I got a husband bought and paid for? The three of us stood frozen in the tiny room, 24 years of marital dysfunction crumbling around us. Through the door, I could hear the rehearsal dinner going on. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, toasts to love and eternity. How long have you known? Celeste asked me, her voice empty. I just found out. I swear. She laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't know. Perfect Fletcher with his perfect proposal and his perfect antique ring. You get the fairy tale and I get the deal. Celeste, numero. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup across her cheek. Do you want to know why I lied to Mom and Dad about you hating weddings? Because I was desperate. Because every guy I've ever dated has dumped me for someone prettier, someone smarter, someone more interesting, someone like you. The pain in her voice cut through my anger. For the first time, I saw the insecurity beneath the golden child facade. So when Garrett proposed to me, she continued, I couldn't believe it. Finally, someone had chosen me first. I would have done anything to keep that feeling, even if I had to steal your wedding fund. Garrett reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me with the hands our parents paid for. Money doesn't matter, he said desperately. I love you now. These last few months love me. Celeste's voice soared to a shriek. You love 50 grand. You love 100 grand. You probably love the bonus Dad just offered you to upset my sister. Through the door, the sounds of dinner were fading. People were starting to notice the commotion. I grabbed both their hands. We need to figure this out together. Figure what? Celeste demanded. How do I save my sham wedding? How do I pretend this whole family hasn't completely fallen apart? No, I said firmly. How do I make them pay for what they did? Celeste stared at me. What are you talking about? An idea was forming in my head. Dangerous and satisfying, perfect for manipulating our parents. You said you heard everything. Did you write it down? She nodded slowly, taking out her phone. I started recording when I saw the two of you disappear. I thought you were having an affair. Play it back. We huddled around her phone, listening to Garrett's confession on tiny audio. Every damning detail was there. The payments, the terms, Dad's offer to upset Fletcher and me. This is evidence of conspiracy to defraud, I said. Emotional manipulation, financial coercion. You sound like a lawyer, Garrett said. I work for a paralegal law firm. I looked between them. We can destroy them in public. Completely. Celeste's eyes lit up with something I'd never seen before. Not jealousy or competition, but genuine guile. What are you planning? I smiled, feeling the same rush I'd felt walking into the rehearsal dinner. We'll give them exactly what they paid for, just not the way they expected. 20 minutes later, we emerged from the dressing room with a plan that would either unite us as sisters or destroy what was left of our family. The rehearsal dinner was winding down, and guests were beginning to say their goodbyes. Mom stood at the door, gracefully accepting compliments on the beautiful venue and the next day's ceremony. Dad walked around the room like a politician, shaking hands and chatting about business opportunities. They had no idea that their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. I found Fletcher sipping whiskey at the bar, looking awkward in his borrowed suit. He wasn't used to this kind of event, formal dinners with people who measured worth in trust funds and country club dues. "How are you holding up?" I asked, wrapping my arms around his waist. He smiled, but I could see the tension around his eyes. "Your dad came to me earlier, asked a lot of questions about my prospects and long-term financial planning." My stomach clenched. Dad's scouting expedition had started early. "What did you tell him? That I loved you and would spend the rest of my life making you happy?" He shrugged. He was unimpressed. I kissed him on the cheek. "You're perfect. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Across the room, I caught Celeste's eye. She was standing next to Garrett. Both of them had tight smiles while his best man told awkward stories. She gave me the slightest nod. It was time. I walked to the center of the ballroom and tapped my champagne flute with the opener. The sound cut through the conversations, drawing everyone's attention. "Excuse me," I said, projecting my voice the way I had learned in college theater. "I'd like to say a few words before everyone leaves tonight." Mom looked worried. "Darling, this is not a good time." In fact, this is the perfect time I smiled widely at the assembled guests, aunts, uncles, family, friends, business associates, all the people whose opinions mattered to my parents. I had wonderful news to share with everyone here tonight. Dad stepped forward, his face darkening. "We can discuss family matters in private." "Oh, but this affects everyone." I gestured to Fletcher, who looked puzzled but joined me in the center of the room. "You see, Fletcher and I are engaged, as I have already announced." But what I didn't mention was how grateful we were to my parents for teaching us such valuable lessons about love and marriage. The room fell silent except for the soft clinking of glasses being lowered. "You taught us that marriage is a partnership," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "A business deal in which both parties benefit. You showed us that genuine affection is less important than financial security." My mother's face went pale. "What are you doing?" "I'm following your example." I turned to face the crowd, many of whom shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. My parents believe in investing in their daughters' futures. In fact, they are so committed to this philosophy that they provide financial incentives for marriage proposals. A murmur swept through the room. Dad started toward me, but Uncle Harold stepped in his way, suddenly very interested in hearing more. "Celeste," I said, "do you want to share your story?" My sister came over and stood next to me, her phone already in her hand. "I'd love to." She pressed play, and Garrett's voice filled the ballroom over the PA system someone had wired for toasts. "You approached me 3 months ago. You said Celeste needed someone stable, someone who could handle her impulsiveness. You were getting 50 grand to propose, another 100 grand if I agreed to the wedding." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps, exclamations, chairs scraping as people stood. Aunt Margaret nearly fainted, holding her husband's hand for support, but the recording didn't end. Then Dad's voice came on, recorded when Garrett accidentally pressed the button during their conversation, if the two of them could solve the family succession problem. This Fletcher guy was a nobody who would never amount to anything. The room exploded. Voices rose in shock and outrage. I saw several family friends pull out their phones, no doubt texting others who weren't present. This would be all over our social circle by morning. Mom pushed through the crowd toward us, her face a mask of rage and panic. "Turn it off right now." "Not yet," Celeste said calmly. "There's more." The recording continued with Dad offering to double Garrett's payment if he could upset Fletcher and me before the wedding. By the time it was over, the silence in the room was deafening. Fletcher stared at me in shock. "Your father tried to pay your sister's fiancé to break up with us, among other things." I took his hand, drawing strength from his steady presence at my side. Dad had finally found his voice. "This is absurd. You're taking everything out of context." "Context?" Celeste laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "What context makes bribing someone to marry your daughter acceptable?" Garrett stepped forward, his face flushed with shame and anger. I gave the money back. Every penny. Tonight, he pulled a cashier's check from his pocket, waving it in the air. "I can't be bought." The crowd pressed forward, hungry for every detail of the unfolding drama. Dad's business partner, William Chen, spoke from the back of the room. Robert, is this true? You actually paid this young man to marry your daughter? This is a misunderstanding. This is fraud. I cut him off. Emotional manipulation at best. At worst, a conspiracy to commit a host of legal and financial abuses. My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You're ruining everything. Your sister's wedding, our reputation, our family. No, I said, breaking free. You ruined it the moment you decided to treat your daughters like commodities to be bartered. Fletcher stood protectively at my side. Sir, he said to my father, I don't care about your money or your opinion of my prospects. I love your daughter, and I'm marrying her whether you approve or not. How noble. Dad chuckled. Easy to say when you're getting a trust fund, baby. Trust fund? I laughed. What trust fund? You spent my college money on Celeste's car. You spent my wedding money on her engagement party. The only thing I get from this family is trauma and abandonment issues. The truth hit the room like a physical blow. Several relatives who had witnessed the favoritism over the years nodded grimly. Others were genuinely shocked to learn how completely our parents had failed both of their daughters in different ways. Celeste stood on my other side. For the first time in our lives, we were truly united. So here's what's going to happen, she announced. Tomorrow's wedding is off. The deposits are forfeit. The flowers can be donated to the hospital, and the caterer can feed anyone who wants to come to a very expensive dinner. You can't do that, Mom. The contracts are all in my name, Celeste said. I checked, and since the marriage was obtained by fraud, I have legal grounds to annul everything. Dad's face turned purple with rage. You're ungrateful, spiteful. We're not done yet, I interrupted. Celeste and I have decided to plan our own weddings together without any financial help from you or your presence. Celeste added, None of you are welcome at our ceremonies. The finality of it hit everyone at once. The relatives' gasps, their shocked expressions, the realization that they had witnessed a family's complete disintegration. You'll regret this, Dad said, his voice low and dangerous. Both of you have no idea how hard life is without family support. Fletcher squeezed my hand. In fact, they do. They've lived like this their entire lives. The consequences were swift and brutal. By the next morning, the story had spread throughout our social circle. The canceled wedding had become the scandal of the season, with speculation ranging from the relatively accurate to the downright wild. Some accused Celeste of being a materialist. Others condemned our parents for their manipulation. Most were simply glad they had a front-row seat to such spectacular family drama. Mom and Dad tried to control the damage, claiming the tape was taken out of context and that we were having emotional breakdowns. But too many people had witnessed their confrontation at the rehearsal dinner. The story was too well-founded to be dismissed. Aunt Margaret called the next morning, her voice shaking with rage. I knew your parents favored Celeste, but this is disgusting. How could you treat both of you like chess pieces? Uncle Harold was more direct. Your father has always been controlling, but buying husbands. This crosses boundaries I didn't even know existed. The business consequences were immediate. Dad's company, built on trust and relationship management, began losing customers. Who wanted to work with someone who so ruthlessly manipulated his own daughter's life? The professional network he had built over decades collapsed in a matter of weeks. Mom fared worse socially. Her position at various charities became untenable as the other women realized she had presented herself as the perfect mother, while simultaneously ruling her daughters' lives like some Victorian patriarch. The quiet refusals to social invitations began within days. Meanwhile, Celeste and I discovered something remarkable. We actually liked each other. Without the competition our parents had created, without the constant comparisons and artificial rivalries, we discovered we had more in common than either of us had thought. We both loved terrible reality TV and expensive wine we couldn't afford. We both carried the same scars from years of conditional love and emotional manipulation. 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner disaster, we met for coffee at Fletcher's bookstore. Celeste had moved into a small apartment downtown, using the money from her canceled wedding vendors to pay for a deposit. She looked tired, but lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I was thinking about what you said, she told me, curling her fingers around her coffee mug, about planning our weddings together. I raised an eyebrow. Do you still want to marry Garrett? She shrugged. Not right away. But eventually, he paid me back, and he's going to therapy to figure out why he thought it was okay to take it. We're starting over. And it turns out I actually like him. When money isn't involved, when our parents aren't pulling strings, we work together pretty well. She smiled. Riley, who would have thought? Fletcher brought over a plate of cookies from the bakery next door, kissing the top of my head before turning back to help a customer. He's right for you, Celeste said. He doesn't try to fix you or change you. He just lets you be yourself. A revolutionary concept, I said dryly. Really? She laughed, as if we'd been dating all our lives. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Fletcher recommend books to the young couple. His genuine enthusiasm for finding books that would appeal to readers was one of the reasons I had been drawn to him in the first place. I owe you an apology, Celeste said suddenly. I looked at her in surprise. For the jokes about marriage, for lying about not wanting to get married, for 24 years of treating you like a rival instead of a sister. Her voice was even, but her hands were shaking slightly. I wanted to be the favorite so badly that I never realized the cost to both of us. You were the favorite, I pointed out. Really? She laughed bitterly. They manipulated me just as they manipulated you. They just used different methods. You got the neglect and criticism. I got the pressure and unrealistic expectations. Either way, we were both left with scars. I thought about it. It was true that Celeste had always seemed so tense under the perfectionism, the A's, the flawless appearance, the constant need to exceed expectations. Maybe it was a prison of sorts. They messed us up badly, didn't they? I asked. She raised her coffee mug in a mock toast. To overcoming our parents' psychological warfare. I slammed mine against hers. To being real sisters instead of rivals. To planning weddings they'd never see. To marrying people who chose us, not paid for us. We dissolved into laughter. The kind of hysterical laughter that comes from realizing the absurdity of your own life. The other shoppers looked around curiously, but we didn't care. For the first time since we were kids, we were genuinely happy to be together. So, Celeste said, when we'd recovered, what kind of wedding do you really want? I thought about it seriously, without the pressure to impress anyone, without worrying about our parents' approval or expectations. What did I really want? Something small, I said. As in, just people who really love us. Where? Maybe a botanical garden? Or that little winery up north where Fletcher and I went on our first weekend getaway together? Celeste nodded approvingly. Intimate, personal? How about music? Fletcher's friend plays acoustic guitar, and there's this singer who sometimes performs at the bookstore. We spent the next 2 hours planning not only my wedding, but the basis for both of our ceremonies. We would have separate events, but we would coordinate them so that close family and friends could attend both. We would share vendors to keep costs down. We would help each other with all the details that our parents would normally have handled themselves. It felt revolutionary, this partnership, this mutual support instead of competition. What about having your dad walk you down the aisle? Celeste finally asked. I shook my head immediately. Absolutely not. The whole tradition is one man giving property to another man. Besides, after what he did, maybe Uncle Harold or maybe no one, I thought. Maybe I'll walk myself down the aisle. I'm not someone's property to be passed down. Celeste smiled. I like that. What if I walk myself too? We could both break that tradition. Or, I said, a sudden thought. What if we walk each other? In both ceremonies, sisters marry each other off to the people they love, her eyes welling up. It was perfect. Planning 2 weddings without any money or help from my parents had been a lesson in creativity and compromise. But it had also been the most fun either of us had had in years. We've found that when you're not trying to impress anyone, weddings become much more about celebration and much less about performance. My ceremony at a botanical garden will feature wildflowers and candles. Celeste's at a winery will feature garlands and local wine. Both will cost a fraction of what our parents had planned for her original extravagance. Fletcher dove into the planning with his usual enthusiasm, researching photographers and enlisting the help of other small business owners. Garrett was surprisingly helpful too, using his connections in the hospitality industry to get vendors at discounted prices. Maybe it was always meant to be this way. Celeste mused one evening as we hand-signed invitations. The four of us working together, instead of each trying to control everyone else. We discovered that Fletcher and Garrett actually got along well when financial duress was removed from the equation. They bonded over their shared experiences of being deemed unsuitable by our parents, and their determination to prove that love meant more than money. The guest lists were small but meaningful. Fletcher's family, who had welcomed me warmly from the first time we met. Friends we chose, not inherited. Co-workers who became confidants. A handful of relatives who reached out after the rehearsal dinner scandal, expressing support and solidarity. Conspicuously absent were our parents. They had made several attempts at reconciliation, but each came with strings attached that showed they still didn't know what they'd done wrong. "We can ignore this misunderstanding," Dad said during one phone call. "If you both come to your senses and let us have proper weddings." "It's not a misunderstanding," I replied. "It's a fundamental difference in values. You see us as investments to be managed. We see ourselves as people who deserve genuine love." Mom tried another approach, playing the victim. "How can you punish us for wanting you both to be financially secure? Everything we did was out of love." "Love doesn't involve deception or manipulation," Celeste replied. "Love doesn't require anyone to be bought or sold." After a few failed attempts, they resorted to threats, cutting off financial support we never asked for, cutting us out of their will, which was never guaranteed anyway, and cutting us out of family. Events that seemed more of a blessing than a punishment. "Let them isolate themselves," Fletcher said pragmatically. "Anyone who sides with them after what they've done isn't worth having in your life." He was right, but it still hurt. Not because I missed their approval. I'd stopped seeking that years ago, but because I was mourning the parents I'd always hoped they'd become. The realization that they were truly incapable of unconditional love was a grief that would take time to process. My wedding took place on a perfect October day, surrounded by chrysanthemums and autumn leaves. 23 guests sat on white folding chairs while Fletcher's friend Tobias strummed an acoustic guitar. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Intimate, sincere, focused on love rather than spectacle. Celeste walked me down the aisle in a navy blue dress that complemented my simple cream one. As she passed my hand to Fletcher, she whispered, "Be happy." And I felt the blessing of sisterhood in a way I never had before. Fletcher had written his own vows, promising to support my dreams, respect my independence, and love me for who I was. His words were specific and personal, referencing inside jokes and shared memories rather than generic romantic cliches. My vows focused on partnership and growth, on choosing each other every day, not just in this moment. I promised to be his anchor when life felt chaotic, his adventure partner when it felt too stable, and his equal in everything. As we kissed as married partners, the small crowd erupted in cheers that seemed more genuine than any applause from a larger audience. The reception was held at Fletcher's bookstore, which we decorated with garlands and small flower arrangements. Local musicians played while guests browsed the shelves and shared stories of love and literature. Instead of a sit-down dinner, we had casual cocktails with food from several small local restaurants. Uncle Harold gave a toast that moved everyone to tears, talking about how proud he was that I had chosen happiness over expectation, authenticity over performance. Aunt Margaret gave us a hand-sewn blanket with quotes about love from famous books. "Your grandmother would have loved this," she told me privately. She always said that marriage should be about two people deciding to build a life together, not about merging family assets. The evening felt magical, but the magic had nothing to do with expensive jewelry or lavish entertainment. It was the magic of being surrounded by people who genuinely care about your happiness, who celebrate your love without reservations or ulterior motives. Celeste's wedding took place 3 weeks later at a winery, in slightly warmer weather and the same intimate atmosphere. This time, I walked her down the aisle, wearing the navy blue dress she'd worn at my ceremony. Her vows to Garrett acknowledged their rocky beginnings but focused on their commitment to honesty and growth in the future. "We started with a lie," she said, "but we decided to build our truth together." Garrett's vows were heartfelt and emotional, publicly apologizing for accepting money to propose and promising to spend his life earning her trust and love through actions, not words. Their reception featured local wines and food made from local ingredients, dancing under the stars, and heartfelt toasts from friends who watched their unusual courtship with dignity and humor. Both weddings cost less than $5,000 each, a fraction of what our parents had planned for Celeste's original ceremony. But they seemed infinitely more precious because every element had been chosen consciously, meaningfully, lovingly, not out of obligation. 6 months after our wedding, Fletcher and I hosted Thanksgiving in our small apartment. It was our first major holiday as a couple, and we had decided to create our own traditions rather than try to navigate the complexities of extended family gatherings. Celeste and Garrett brought wine and homemade bread. Uncle Harold and Aunt Margaret came with stories and laughter. Fletcher's parents came up from Philadelphia with his grandmother's recipe for stuffing and endless enthusiasm for our happiness. We cooked together, told each other awkward stories, played board games that devolved into competitive chaos. It was everything holiday gatherings should be: warm, chaotic, full of love and terrible jokes. "This is what family should feel like," Celeste observed as we cleaned up afterward. "Chosen and joyful, not obligatory and stressful." I nodded, watching Fletcher explain the rules of some complicated card game to Garrett while Uncle Harold dozed on the couch. No one pretended. No one kept score. Everyone simply belonged. "Do you think they'll ever realize what they've lost?" she asked, referring to our parents. I thought about it. We had heard from mutual friends that Mom and Dad were having a hard time dealing with the social fallout from the wedding scandal. Several long-standing friendships had ended as people took sides. Dad's business was slowly recovering, but his reputation was irreparably damaged. Mom had withdrawn from most social events, apparently unable to cope with the whispers that followed her everywhere. "I don't think they're capable of that kind of self-reflection," I finally said. "They'll probably always see themselves as victims in this situation." "It's sad." "It is, but it's not our responsibility to fix or forgive." Celeste nodded thoughtfully. "I used to think family was something you couldn't get rid of. That blood ties meant you had to accept whatever treatment they gave you. And now I know that family is something that is built with intention and care and mutual respect." She glanced around the room, gesturing at the people who had chosen to be a part of our lives. "This is my real family." The following spring, Fletcher and I found out I was pregnant. We'd been trying for months, but a positive pregnancy test still felt unreal. We sat on the bathroom floor at 6 in the morning, staring at the little pink lines and marveling at the fact that we were about to become parents. "Our baby is going to grow up very differently than we did," I said, instinctively placing my hand on my still flat stomach. "In what way?" "Unconditional love, no favoritism, no manipulation or emotional blackmail." I leaned against his shoulder. "Just acceptance and support." Fletcher kissed the top of my head. "And bedtime stories from the bookstore." "Don't forget the literary benefits." I laughed. "Our baby is going to have the most bookish childhood in history." When we told Celeste and Garrett the news, they immediately began making plans to be the best aunt and uncle. Celeste, who had always been competitive about everything, surprised me by expressing nothing but genuine joy and excitement. "I'll be the fun aunt who teaches them dirty songs and buys them noisy toys," she said gleefully. "And I'll be the uncle who sneaks them extra dessert and teaches them card tricks," Garrett added. It occurred to me that our children would grow up with a very different understanding of family than we had. They would see adults who supported each other, celebrated each other's successes, and resolved conflicts with honesty and respect. They would never doubt whether they were loved or wonder how much they were being loved.